Hello, everyone. Welcome to our live Q&A call for January. And I hope everybody's having a good new year. So far, so good for everyone. Certainly that's the case for me. So before we get started, just real quick, want to introduce you all to my co-host. If you haven't seen her or met her before, this is Cindy Adams, my mom. Hi, Mom. I'm not sure I heard you. Can you?
Hi.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Okay.
I couldn't hear you right. Just wanted to make sure that we could hear you. So how are things going for you?
Oh, just fine, thanks. If you hear some noise in the background, the recycling truck just went by.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Other than that, we're fine.
Okay, good. I might also have some noise. I'm trying right now. So my dogs were sound asleep and it seemed cruel to wake them up just to make them go upstairs. So I'm not expecting anything going on out in the yard. So they should be quiet. But if not, if you hear barking, then it's just my dogs. And I will not make that mistake again. So right now it's an experiment. See if they stay asleep this whole time. Okay, so let's see, maybe we just talk a little bit about what's going on in the accelerator. And Mom, you have really been working on the roadmap, and in particular, the module that we will be releasing at the end of this month called Unlocking Your Authentic Leader. Do you want to say anything about that?
Well, it's been a pleasure to proofread them all. It's been very enlightening. I think everyone will enjoy it because I like the way that it addresses the whole person, and it starts with addressing your self-esteem issues. If you have self-esteem issues, then it works towards introspection, like how to journal, how the benefits of meditation. Then it kind of moves down into a broader discovery of yourself, like what are your passions, how you can live courageously, how to make a bucket list, which you just posted, which was one of my favorites. It just happened to be one of my favorites. So, and I like that the affirmations match with the quick wins. So I think your members will really, really enjoy it and learn a lot from it. I certainly did.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your help with that. I will say, I mean, I agree with you 100%. And I will say that, you know, the technical, oftentimes the highly technical folks want to skip over this kind of stuff, right? This is the mindset module that goes in this particular roadmap. It is about the inner game. And I think a lot of people, particularly new leaders, think that it's not important. New leaders tend to think that it's all about getting results. It's all about managing people. It's all about sort of these tactical things that you have to do in leadership. And while all of that is important and true, the inner game of really embracing everything that there is about yourself and bringing all of that to your leadership role and your vision, that is critically important. And when you're able to do that, that really unlocks a lot of leadership capacity. And so what I find is that more seasoned leaders that I work with, they are like, okay, help me with my mindset, help me with my mindset, you know, or, oh, I wish I had learned this earlier. So I just want to tell the folks who might be seeing this video that don't skip over this. It might be a little bit uncomfortable to go through some of these things, but don't skip over it. And then I promise you the very next module, it's all about giving technical presentations. So it is extremely tactical. It's very technical. So I will not force you to spend a lot of time thinking about yourself, but it's important that you don't skip over it. So thank you very much, Mom, for working on that and helping to get all of that content together. And we will have that all up and ready for everyone at the end of the month. Okay, so I'll take you off camera because I know that's your preference. Okay, and then just a reminder to folks on the call, you know, if you have a question, you can either raise your hand yourself and you can come off mic and ask me, or you can put it in the chat. And my mom is monitoring the chat, so she will be asking those questions and relaying those questions to me. So a couple of other quick things, just a quick overview of what's been going on since our last call. So no new members in the last month. I think with the holidays and everything, we don't have new members, but we are launching a private cohort on February 1st. So I'm hopeful that we'll have a nice group of folks all coming in together. And it should be basically transparent to everyone else. I mean, it should not be, I'm sorry, I mean, opaque, like it's not going to cause any difference. You'll just maybe see some new faces on the calls asking questions, and maybe see some new people in the forum, but otherwise it's just a group of folks coming in all together. Some of the things that we added to the membership. So I put in a couple of topics this month already. So I asked about the books that you've given most often as a gift and why. I asked about an investment that you made last year that made a big difference. And then I also asked you about your leadership style. And I really want to double click on the one about your leadership style. So not only is it something that I think would be of interest for this group to talk about, but it is an extremely common interview question. I always ask it when I interview. I consult with a lot of hiring managers and entrepreneurs, and I always ask them to ask this question. So it's really something that you want to be able to craft a good response to. So a great way to do that is to practice in the forum. And we can also, we can do some one-on-one coaching around that. If you find yourself in an interviewing situation, then practicing interview questions and answers is something that I do a lot of, and I think coaching is well suited for that. I also put in that particular forum topic, I put a link to a podcast that does a really nice job of explaining how to actually format your answer. It's less about the content because everybody has different leadership styles, and a lot of different styles are perfectly acceptable. But there is a little bit of a technique around actually answering it so that you can convey your thoughts clearly. And that podcast link that I put in the forum really does a great job of explaining how to do that. And Mom, if you don't mind to take a note, let's also put the link to that podcast in the show notes for this live Q&A call so folks don't have to go and hunt for it. And then the other thing that we put in the membership is the personal leadership roadmap. So a roadmap is simply a multi-step learning path that has a specific sequence that I personally have chosen because I think it will give you the most bang for your buck. And so this first roadmap, I'm envisioning 3 roadmaps eventually. One on personal leadership, which is the first one that we put into the accelerator, and the first 2 modules are ready to go. This is going to be about whether you're an individual contributor, and even if you want to stay an individual contributor, but you want to have more influence over projects, more influence over your ability to get a promotion, then that's for you. If you are a manager or supervisor, this is also for you. And even if you're an experienced leader, seasoned leader, director, CEO level, I have yet to meet a seasoned leader who didn't have some holes in some of these personal leadership techniques that I'm teaching you, because typically what happens is as you progress, of course, no one, fills in all of the gaps. You're good enough to get to the next level, and you're good enough to get to the next level. But once you get to a really high level, you realize that having these gaps actually really starts to affect your performance and your ability to lead and transform and lead change and things like that. So I started there because I think it's going to be applicable to everyone in the membership, regardless of your level. And then my vision is for the second roadmap to be an organizational leadership roadmap that really talks about how to lead people, delegation, team management, succession planning, how to build trust with your organization, those sorts of topics. And then the last one is what I'm at least tentatively calling transformational leadership. This is about when you're at the top level of your organization, VP or your CEO of your own organization. This is where you are leading big transformations, and you need to really, as I said before, fill in all of the gaps, but also really understand how to influence people. Because you are talking about large sums of money, large groups of people, things like that. So that'll be the third roadmap. So that's my goal, that's my plan. But I really want to hear from you all as you start working on this personal leadership roadmap. Please give me feedback on what you like, what you don't like. Also about the pacing. I have a vision that this first roadmap will take about 12 weeks to kind of get all the way through. But if it's too fast or too slow, I really would love some feedback on that before I take the effort to go through with the other two roadmaps. But the first one will be done at the end of February, and so I'm hoping that you all have a chance to take a look at it. Okay, so with that overview, I'm just going to start answering questions. As I said, I've got several questions here that have come through via the survey, and I'll just start answering. And if anybody wants to raise their hand and ask me anything live, you are always welcome to do that. So question number one, my organization wants me to implement a big change, but one, I'm not sure that I agree with it. And two, they aren't really supporting me with kind of the types of communications that and information that I need. So how can I manage this effectively? Okay, so implementing a change in an organization. So there's a couple of things that are important to recognize here. So first of all, if you can think a little bit about, or maybe have a mindset of, okay, my role is to implement this change as effectively as I can, both for the organization as a whole, the greater organization, but also for my team. So what are some of the things that would make that more effective? So first of all, from an organizational standpoint, they probably have some goals and milestones in terms of the timeline of implementation. They may give you a budget associated with implementation of this change. So it's important for you to really understand what those parameters are, and also to understand the motivation behind the change. So if you can get some answers to those questions as early as possible, that is something that you need to try to do. And then when you think about implementing to your team's probably going to have all of these questions about, okay, yeah, I know the organization wants to do this, but how is that going to affect me and my day-to-day life? And so thinking about questions that they might have and how it might impact them, and coming up with your best answers to those questions, whether you just think through and answer yourself based on your own knowledge, or if you can feed those questions up to the people who are promulgating the change, then that can be really helpful. And so the first step to all of this is really doing as much information gathering as you can. And as we've talked about before, lots of organizations are not good at just giving you the information the first time around. Oftentimes you have to ask detailed questions. And so I think being proactive in asking those types of questions, okay, why are we doing this? What could be the impact on my team? How do you want this implemented? Once you kind of have those basic pieces of information, now you have something to work with for your own communication. And so on the implementation side, the way to really do it as effectively as possible is to be very transparent with your team that, this is a change, here's the reason why. And here's as what I know today, here's how it will impact us. And here's what here's what I've committed to the organization in terms of timelines of implementation, et cetera. And I will update you in a couple of days or weeks or whatever the right time frame is, keep you informed and updated on our progress and any new information that I'm getting from the organization. Those are really the main things that you have to consider when implementing a change. I think that organizations, your teams, as the leader of a team, I really think they give you a lot of points, kind of respect points for communicating with them openly, communicating with them early. So even if you don't necessarily feel like you have 100% of the information that you wish you could convey with them, it's better to, just put your thoughts down and communicate quickly rather than to wait. And then that's where, you know, they start hearing things through the grapevine, and that just raises people's anxiety, raises skepticism, et cetera. So do your best to kind of formulate your talking points early on, and then just be open, say, this is new, this is based on what I know as of today, and I will, you know, I will follow back up with you in a week or so to as I learn more. And then also asking them, what are your questions? I will do my best to feed those back up to the organization and get them answered in as timely a manner as possible. So, you know, that's kind of the tactics behind it. I also think that if you focus on really the tactics behind it, so my role here, if you think my role here is really to be that transition between the organization's goals and objectives and my team, that sometimes can help you get out of this mindset of, well, you know, I don't really like this and the organization sucks, you know, because they haven't given me everything that I need. And you know what I mean? You can get yourself into your own mindset of worry and frustration and things like that, which of course makes the communication to the team, you know, it shows up there, right? So it's like, okay, well, if the boss is frustrated and everything, then we too will be frustrated. We will be even more worried than we already are about, you know, what this all means and how this is going to affect us. So I do think it is a leader's role to try to temper that. You don't want to pass that anxiety down. You want to try to do your best to really be a stopgap for that. I am not saying to lie, to gloss over things. I'm saying to really keep it in an objective, this is what's been recommended by the organization, or this is what the organization wants to do, and here's why. This is our role, and here's what we're going to do. I'm sure you have concerns. Here's what I know. I will do my best to get more information. And then you enter into this feedback loop with your own team to try to help them overcome their objections, understand what they need to do, and start to feel better as best as they can about the overall change. I think that's really the best way to go. I will say, you know, and it's often, I mean, I've had to implement tons of things that I've not liked personally myself. And I do think that it can sometimes be it can feel good to commiserate with the team and get into this mode of, you know, bad mouthing the leadership. And I really want you to not do that, to really try very hard to not do that, because it's just not a leadership. It's not a leadership role. It is not leadership behavior. And so if you have big objections, then you need to talk to your boss about them. But if you really don't feel like you can implement something, if you really hate it that much, then you need to think about being in a different role, more so than adding to the anxiety and the negativity and things like that. So, but again, I think that if you can go into a mindset of how can I implement this as effectively as I can with the least impact on my team, and start going into problem solving, I think that'll really help you with your own sort of feelings about it. Even if, you know, as I said, the organization isn't giving you all the information you need, and they're not necessarily being forthcoming with details, things like that. If you can go into problem solving mode, because your role is to both implement but take care of your team, sometimes it can help you kind of just overcome those challenges. And it also gives you great questions to ask. I mean, just if you have a detailed set of questions, you can ask the leadership. The other thing you can do, and I've done this before, is you can invite the leadership to come and talk to your team, to say, hey, you know, I've shared this with them. They still have lots of questions. I think it would be great if you could, take 30 minutes to really come and talk to us. And sometimes that, doing that, particularly if the leader agrees to do that, and I honestly have never, that's a tactic I use a lot, and I've never had a leader say, no, I'm not going to come and talk to your team, particularly if it's your immediate boss. I mean, if you're 4 levels away from the CEO and you invite her to come, she may not come. But if you go to your immediate boss, they are often completely willing to do that. And that can go a long way towards your team, because they're like, oh, okay, one, we've heard it directly from the boss, and two, our manager cares enough about us and what we're concerned about to try to get leadership to really come and clarify for us. So that's another tactic that you can consider using. Okay, next question. I have identified someone to be my successor. How can I set them up to be considered for the role when the time comes? Okay, so succession planning is really critically important. And so first of all, I'm glad that you're thinking about this. And when it comes to setting your candidate up for success, you need to do a couple of things. So at the end of the day, the reason that this person would be considered for a promotion or be considered to take your role is because they have sufficiently demonstrated to the leadership that they can do, you know, some percentage. Let's just, for round numbers, let's call it 75%. They have somehow demonstrated that they have the capacity to do about 75% of the role for which you're recommending them. So that is your goal, is to say, okay, I want the decision makers, the people that are going to be deciding about whether or not this person can take my role. We'll just use it to say for your own successor. I want to demonstrate that to them that this person can take 75% of the role or more, and be considered a ready now candidate for that. And so now you can kind of work backwards to, okay, what are the key things that, again, if they're a successor for you, what are the key things that I'm doing right now? Or what are the key things that the incumbent are doing right now that we consider to be the success factors for that role? And then how can I demonstrate that that person can do those things? Very often that would be putting them on a special project that would allow them to demonstrate some of those things, or delegating part of your tasks to that person. And then making sure not only that you delegate the work, but that you also give them the opportunity to communicate about the work, present it to leadership, etc., so that they have the view. They need to really, in their mind, be able to envision this person in that role. And so it's creating those opportunities for them to, join you in a meeting and maybe be the one to facilitate the meeting, or co-author a paper, or be the lead author on a paper, to present the progress report, or write the progress report and present that status update in the meeting. Whatever the key things are that are in the role that you want to get them to be the successor for, just find small opportunities for them to do it. So they don't have to do it for extended periods of time. It's not like they necessarily need to do like a 6-month type of thing. There are some organizations that do have an interim role where they really do put the person in that role for, say, 6 months to kind of try out. And so if your organization is like that, then obviously that's something that's a lever that you want to pull. But not everybody does that. And so what you want to be doing is creating instances, even if they're short term, where this person can demonstrate some key skills and behaviors to leadership, so that when the time comes and you say, okay, I want to put this person up for this role, then your job really is just to remind them of what they've done. And remember, okay, so because they've done this, and this, they've been in this meeting, and then, the decision makers say, oh yeah, I remember that. They did a good job. Yeah, I remember that. So sometimes you may have to create those opportunities, right? Sometimes you may just have to say, oh, hey, I'd really like for this person to present this status update. Is that okay with you? Or even, and I have done this in the past, is say, tell my direct reports, okay, if you've got people you think are going to be ready for promotion soon, then let's do some quick 30-minute project updates with them. Just schedule them on my calendar so that I can see them and interact with them, so that I feel comfortable, putting them up for promotion, because sometimes those decisions aren't necessarily you. It depends on what level you are in the organization. You may be, a couple levels down from the actual decision-making meeting. So recognize that you may need to expose this person to multiple people at different levels before, they'll feel comfortable doing that. The other thing, and again, depends on your industry. So academia and the United States National Lab Systems do have a culture of wanting outside people to vouch for the, in particular, the technical capabilities of different people who are up for promotion or up for fellowships, things like that. So be very mindful of that. Start early if you're going to be, kind of sending out your candidate's dossier to try to get other people to write recommendations and references. So start that process as early as possible when you think they might be ready for either the succession planning or the promotion or whatever. But at the end of the day, the real thing you need to have in your mind is, how can I demonstrate that this person is ready to the people who will make that decision? And it's delegating some of the work. It's creating new opportunities for the people to demonstrate. And it's also pulling any external levers that might be requirements associated with the succession planning protocols, depending on whatever type of organization that you are in. Okay, next question. I want to transition to a different industry after 20 years. How can I convince hiring managers to consider me? Okay. This is a great question, and I get this a lot. So the main thing that you need to do when you're talking to hiring managers is you need to paint a picture for them using your words and your documents, resume, cover letter, whatever. You need to paint a very vivid picture for them that you can do whatever role that you're going after. And so the thing you need to be aware of is, just because you might be able to see in your mind how your skills in a specific industry translate directly to the same type of role in a different industry, just because you might be able to see that doesn't mean that the hiring manager will be able to see that. And so you should just assume that the hiring managers what is the right way to say this? I don't want to say they're lazy, because that's not what I mean. What I mean is just that their role at that moment is just pattern recognition. They just want to easily find something that's star-shaped that fits into their role that is star-shaped. And they want to find the exact thing that's a circle that fits exactly, like that is their role. And so that's the mindset that they're in. And so you have to be the one to say, in this role, it was star-shaped, but really it's a circle. And I know I'm probably using a poor analogy here, but it's just that you have to do all of the work. You can't assume that just because they are a technical person, or just because, even if you've done the research on the hiring manager, just because they've had roles in the past that kind of match what you've done before, you cannot leave anything to chance that they will be able to make that translation from your role in one industry to another. And so let me just get to how you actually do this. So the way you actually do this is to use their language. So the job description has specific language in there about the role, how they describe it, the jargon that they're using inside of that job description. And you need to use their own words when you describe your own roles in your experience. And when you can do that, that very much will help them to make that translation in their mind that, oh, okay, yeah, this person can do that. They have done that before, and they don't have to do any work themselves to really make that translation. So, if you're able to do that, that's really kind of the main thing that you need to do. And that's even if you're going from like a manager role to a manager role. So if you're a manager, you know, I guess I can kind of use myself as an example. So I was in the aluminum industry for 20 years, and then I switched to the stainless steel industry, right? So people could say, okay, those are two totally different industries. Yes, they are. I'm not going to deny that. They are two totally different industries, but research and development in heavy manufacturing, in my mind, it was really research and development in heavy manufacturing, which has a lot of similarities. So when I talked about my role and my work and my experience, I would use, you know, things like research and development, things like, you know, optimization. So for example, you know, Alcoa had something called the Alcoa Business System, or they would use a lot of things like Lean Six Sigma type of language. Well, this is about continuous improvement and optimizations. That's what that kind of process is about. But the industry that I was going into, the company I was going into, didn't use any of that stuff. So I didn't talk about Lean Six Sigma. I didn't talk about, you know, the Toyota production system at the detail level, because it wasn't language that they used. But when I looked at the job description, they were talking about things like continuous improvement. They were talking about things like efficiency. So I used that language instead to describe the type of work that I did, that I was doing. And then even the sort of people management and HR type of roles and systems, they used, it was a European company. So they just called it different things. And so if you can just make those translations to call whatever the work that you're doing using the language of your target firm or your target industry, that signals fit, versus using this weird language and they're like, okay, you know, we don't really understand what you're talking about. And then they see you as not fitting. So that's really the key. This is another opportunity where coaching can work really, really well. I've done this a lot with people, is actually just say, send me a couple of job descriptions of what you're going for. And then I'll come up with some questions that I would ask them, just some very basic questions. And then we would just listen to their answers. We can record your answers. We can, just like we're doing now, recording the Zoom call. And then we can go through and say, okay, well, you kind of described it, you know, you didn't describe it the same way they described it. So let's see if we can just rephrase some of these things. So that you can be seen as more of a fit for this change in industry. The other thing, just sort of related to this question, when you have something like 20 years of experience, the other thing that I want you to do if you are looking to switch jobs or to switch industries is to start with a lateral transition, or maybe even, you know, a role or half a role above where you are. I think so many people assume that they have to go backwards in the career transition, the career ladder, if they're switching industries. And I don't think that's the case at all. I tell you, I didn't do that. I went from, I went up, actually. I transitioned industry and went up. Now, I did do that on the heels of getting an MBA, so I would definitely consider that to be part of what helped me with that boost. But I've also seen plenty of people, actually there are plenty of people who were in that same MBA program I were in and still went backwards, still thought they had to go backwards. So I definitely think you should be looking for roles that are essentially a lateral move, because you have tons of experience and the work is just around translating all of that into how you're going to enrich and do well in this new role. And it's not about like specific training or degrees or you know, needing to be in a new industry for a period of time. So that's just the other thing I would just mention, is that I really would suggest that you at least start there. Now, you try it for a while, you apply for different roles, and if you don't make headway, then you might consider trying for a slightly lower role. But I wouldn't start there. I wouldn't just automatically assume that you have to go backwards in career progression if you want to switch industries. That's typically not the case at all. If you can be really good at demonstrating that your skills match their their requirements. And again, it's a lot of it is just through the use of language and descriptions and making sure that you're fitting into their view of what that role is. Okay, next question. I am considering starting my own consulting business, but I'm concerned that if I leave industry for a year or two, I won't be able to come back. What do you think about it? So I did that too. So, I had that same situation, and I will tell you where I got to in my own head, and what I think is the right answer, which is that you know, you don't spontaneously forget everything you knew just because you leave your chosen industry for a period of time. So I think that's the one piece of it, right? So everything I ever knew about innovation, research and development, it is all, you know, basically still there in my brain. Now I actually use a lot of it in my consulting, in the consulting arm of my business, but you know, that none of that goes away. So there's that. If you are in a very fast moving, high growth, you know, steep learning curve industry, things like AI or things like, you know, maybe like machine learning or things like, if you're in that type of industry, then, you know, you may want to consider a refresh / development type of plan for yourself. If you say, okay, I'm going to leave this industry for 2 years to try to do my consulting business. Can I plan about, okay, how might I just refresh myself on the state of the art if I choose to come back? And just think a little bit through that. What are the resources that you would pull on in order to do that, right? I mean, we're all gonna, because we're all highly technical folks, highly educated folks, I feel confident that you know, refresh would go quite quickly. But it might make sense to make you feel a little bit better about you know, taking a pause. If you really thought through, okay, well, what would I do if I wanted to refresh myself on the state of the art? Is there a conference I could go to? Is there some publications I would read? Is there a short course that I would take, you know, somewhere that I would take that could get me up to speed on the state of the art in my industry if I choose to pause? So that's another thing you could think of. I will also say, because I've gone through this, that I actually think that question, there's maybe something a little bit more behind that question than just, you know, what will industry think about your skill set. I think there also might be a question about what will the industry think about my dedication to the industry, or how do I, if I choose to come back, how do I tell them that I failed at this other venture? And so that also can be overcome. And I think, you know, particularly now, so if this question came up maybe 15 years ago, I would say it would be more unique. It'd be more of a kind of an oddball, weird thing on your resume. But now, I mean, it's almost an anomaly if you don't have a side hustle or a venture or a pause or even like 2 quick changes in succession on your resume. I mean, I was one of sort of the last ones who had worked at the same place, you know, for 20 plus years. When I was coming through, I know when I was getting my MBA, you know, really I was, you know, one of, you know, there was 10% of us had started our career at the same company and, you know, and we're still working there. Everyone else had job hopped quite a bit, including taking entrepreneurial ventures and coming back. So that piece of it is one, not uncommon. And 2, you know, I think, again, if you just plan a little bit about, okay, well, what's my story here? What do I want to tell people? Say, oh, well, you know, I was really passionate about going on my own. And in this case, I think this person said consulting business, and do some consulting in an industry. Why? I mean, you know your why better than I do, but for whatever reasons, maybe you wanted to have more autonomy. Maybe you wanted to try a new approach that wasn't, that a new innovative approach that you felt like the industry was too slow moving, or maybe you wanted to serve a part of the demographics of your industry that you felt like was underserved. Whatever your original motivation for going out on your own, you really just have to say that. You say, hey, I took this 2-year opportunity to go out on my own, start this venture because of X. I tried it for a couple of years and realized that it wasn't for me. And so now I'm back in industry. What I learned from that was, and if you can glean a couple of things that you learned from that you can actually bring back to this new role, that will be something that I think will be additive to your overall package when you're out there looking for your next role, if you decide to come back into industry. So I just want to allay the fears associated with that part as well. So there's the technical side, maintaining knowledge of the state of the art. If you're in kind of a slow moving industry, 2 years is not gonna do anything. If you're in an extremely fast moving industry, just think about how you will refresh yourself on the state of the art, conference, literature, training, short course, something like that. And then also just wrap your mind around taking these sort of like pivots in one's career are extremely, extremely common these days. And you really just need to come up with a short, kind of concise couple of statements about why you did it, what you learned, why you did it, why you're back, and what you learned. And that's how you can manage that. But I would not be concerned about that at all in terms of your ability to come back into industry if you decide to do that. Okay. I have to deliver bad news to my team about a project being defunded. How can I do it humanely and effectively? That's such a great question. I think we continue to see in the news, and I know those of you that are active on LinkedIn, we keep seeing on LinkedIn these like horrible, horrible examples of like CEOs doing mass layoffs via Zoom and stuff like that. And so we all know what not to do. So the question then becomes, so how do you actually do it? How do you actually do it in a humane and effective way? And I'm actually going to use an example, a personal example, because while I was heartbroken that we had to close down this project, I was very proud with how we implemented that decision and worked with everyone. So I was leading a project that was actually being run in Norway. It was sort of a breakthrough technology, and I was leading this project. And the project had been going on for many, many, many years, and there was a small team. Actually, I think at its peak there were about 50 people, and I was leading this team. There were about 50 people, and after, at least under my leadership, a year, 18 months of really trying to hit the technical milestones, but also really doing a very detailed kind of financial analysis and risk analysis of the overall project, we kind of concluded that it wasn't going to be possible to keep going at the project, keep going with this project. So once I had gotten alignment with my own leadership about what are we going to do, now we're going to close down this project. And so once that decision had been made, now how do we implement that in the best way possible, the most humane and effective, as this person asked? How did we do that? And there's a couple of key things that you need to do. So first of all, I think you really need to put a clear communication plan in place, meaning you need to think through with, maybe if it's yourself, if you're the main lead on the project. In my case, I had a project manager, so I really, first of all, informed the project manager, told him we're not going to disclose this yet, but you and I need to put the communication plan together. And we really need to brainstorm about, what do we need? First of all, what are the implications? Like, if we close down this project, like, what's the funding situation? What do layoffs look like? Tactically, what is actually going to happen? We needed to work through all of those details. And then we needed to be clear on what are we going to communicate to this group and when. What potential resources will be made available to them. You know, if you have human resources who can be there, if you have some sort of like, if you have any mental health kind of resources who can be there, who can help kind of ease the transition. Yeah, compensation people, all of those people, what kind of resources will we have available for when we make this announcement? And so we went through all of that, and then we put together written communication plan. This is, you know, this is what we're doing. This is why. This is when it will be implemented. This is the impact. These are your contacts. These are your resources. And this is when, you know, we'll follow back up with you. We put a communication plan together, made sure that my project manager and I were, you know, read it, understood it, made sure that it was clear with the communications people, you know. So in these sorts of situations, there's a country manager and there's a plant manager. And so there's a lot of bureaucracy in some cases, but we just needed to make sure that everybody, you know, understood what was happening, was clear with the plan, agreed with the plan. And then the thing that I will say, you know, during COVID, we couldn't do, but COVID is over. Then I got on a plane and flew to Norway so that I could personally tell this group of people what was going on. And that is where the humane and effectiveness comes in. And, you know, so my program manager was there. He communicated everything in the native language, so to make sure everybody understood. And then I said my talking points. And then, you know, we also had another leader there for Q&A, and we, you know, we did it. And the thing that I was really, I think, most proud about, given how bad the situation was, is that, you know, one of the leaders was there and he said, you said exactly what the person said in Norwegian, like, even though I had no idea what he said. And I was like, okay, because we had really been intentional about thinking through our communication plan, really making sure that we were all on the same page, that we told them everything that we could tell them, and, you know, in such a way that was as respectful as possible, even though it was, you know, horrible, you know, it was bad news. And we had spent so much time on that together that my English version and his Norwegian, you know, what turned out to be the same thing, even though, you know, I didn't know what he said. But I mean, I was confident that he said what I wanted. But so that's really the way that I think you really need to do it is so kind of breaking back down the steps. First of all, being clear on the decision, the implications, and then really thinking through what are you going to say about what's happening, why it's happening, your best understanding of the impact on them, your best understanding of the resources that they can utilize to help them manage their lives and their own thought processes, and then delivering the news in person to the extent that you can, is really the way to deliver bad news like that, whether it be one person or whether it be a group of people. And I've worked in global companies my whole corporate career, and we've always gotten on a plane and delivered the news in person. You know, COVID notwithstanding, global pandemic is notwithstanding, but if you thought enough of someone to hire them, to include them into your organization, then you need to do your absolute best to give them the respect and dignity of being very clear, honest, open, and delivering that information in person if you possibly can, or at least one-on-one. I mean, if that means you have to have, 2,000 15-minute Zoom meetings, or I mean, I don't know. I think that's kind of what you have to do, because otherwise, I think you're just really not doing what I consider to be strong leadership. So, okay. So any other questions in the chat, or I've finished all the questions that I had. So I think that we will close it from there. So just quickly, what's coming up in the accelerator? So as I mentioned, we'll be adding the authentic leader training to the roadmap. This is a 6-module training course, and I think it'll take you 2 to 3 weeks to complete. And as I said in the beginning, I really want to encourage you to not skip this. I know many times we technical folks think that mindset and emotion and stuff like that, we think that doesn't apply to us. I know I say that out of complete total experience, like that is exactly what I thought really up until I had my own executive coach when I was in the MBA program, and I realized, okay, so a lot of this self-awareness stuff was blocking me. It was blocking my progress. And once I embraced the need to really evaluate all that stuff, it really turned a corner for me with my leadership, but also now in what I do now, it's really imperative because I in my role now, I really have to do my best to try to make people feel comfortable, feel a safe environment, so that they can open up and share with me, so that I can coach them. But leaders and organizations really need to create safe environments and have the self-awareness to understand, what's working well from their behavior and what's not. Because that's how people tell you the truth about what's really going on in the organization. That's the only way you can improve organizations, if people are willing to tell you the truth, really willing to tell you what's not working. And particularly in many of us who are in the innovation space, you will spend so much money on crappy projects because people are afraid to tell you that they're failing. And so emotional intelligence will actually help you to unlock any behaviors that you might have that kind of are hindering that kind of progress. So that's coming up. And our next meeting will be February 15th, same time, same station. So with that, I'll see you all next time. Thanks, everybody. Bye.